Let's break it down straight from the hill to your hometown. No spin, no hype, just facts we find. AI's on the case, no truth left behind. Laws are written, deals are made. Who's got your back, who's throwing shade? We cut through the noise, decode the text, keeping it real. Congress in context, Congress in context, shining the light, breaking it down so you know what's right. Policies, votes, who's working for you? We bring the facts, the power is you.
Welcome to Congress in Context. We're doing another deep dive into the Congressional Record, really trying to pull out the key insights for you from Capitol Hill.
Exactly.
You've shared a whole bunch of recent activity, and today we're going to unpack the big debates, the important bills, and kind of the trends that are shaping policy right now.
Yeah, there's quite a bit in this snapshot.
Our mission really is just to give you a clear picture of what's happening, why it matters, without getting totally bogged down in all the legislative jargon.
Right. Think of it as your shortcut to understanding the inner workings. This edition shows that push and pull of governing really well. We'll look past the headlines, get into the arguments, the dynamics, maybe even future implications.
Okay, let's get into it then. The first thing that really stood out was a pretty major debate around a Republican budget reconciliation bill. Representative Courtney seemed seriously concerned about Medicaid.
Yeah, and the process itself, budget reconciliation, that's telling. For anyone maybe not familiar, it's this special way Congress can pass certain budget laws with just a simple majority in the Senate. So no 60-vote filibuster needed.
Which makes it a really powerful tool for whichever party's in charge, right?
Exactly. Which is why Representative Courtney's concerns about potential Medicaid cuts, well, they carry a lot of weight. Medicaid, as he pointed out, covers, 72 million Americans? That's huge.
And it wasn't just him saying it. He mentioned children's hospitals, essential safety net hospitals, are all raising alarms, saying they just don't have the flexibility to absorb big cuts like that.
Absolutely. And if you connect that to the bigger picture, the Federation of American Hospitals, Director Chip Kahn, basically urged them to go back to the drawing board entirely.
Wow.
Yeah, the message was pretty stark. Lives depend on this. It really drives home that these aren't just, abstract budget figures. It's about access to crucial health care for so many people.
Right. And all this is happening while the national debt is, enormous. Courtney mentioned interest payments last month hit $89 billion. Billion.
Which is, like you said, even more than defense spending for that month.
Yeah. That really puts the pressure on, doesn't it, to deal with the debt?
It does, and it frames this fundamental question about priorities. The way Courtney put it, it's a values debate. Do we support health care for vulnerable people, or do we lean towards more tax cuts? You really see the different governing philosophies clashing there.
Okay, shifting gears a little to something more personal. We saw Representative Bose give a really moving tribute. It was for Illinois State Trooper Clay Matthew Carnes, who was tragically killed in the line of duty late last year.
Yeah, those moments in the record, they're powerful. They remind you of the human side of everything. Bose shared details about Trooper Carnes, his background, his joining the state police in 2014. It really highlights the risks these officers face every day.
And Bose also used it as a moment to recognize National Police Week, asking everyone to remember the dedication and sacrifice of officers everywhere, especially those like Trooper Carnes.
It's a very timely point, especially considering some of the other discussions we'll get into about support for local law enforcement.
Good point. Okay, next up, Representative Thanedar. His remarks covered a few different topics, starting with his oath to protect the Constitution.
Which is, fundamental. But then he pivoted pretty quickly to global affairs, specifically mentioning Victory Day and strongly condemning what he called war criminal Putin's insane propaganda.
He even drew a historical line, didn't he? Back to the Moscow-Hitler alliance in '39 and the invasion of Poland.
Yeah, that historical framing is really key to understanding how some members view the current war in Ukraine. Thanedar clearly sees it as part of a longer pattern of authoritarian aggression.
Then he made a pretty strong claim. He said open borders for dictators put Americans at higher risk of 9/11-style attacks, and he cited an FBI warning. He also credited President Trump with reinstituting existing laws for protection and exposing Putin's lies, as he put it.
Right. Now, the link between immigration policy and terrorism risk, that's obviously a really complex debate with lots of different views. Thanedar's statement reflects one particular perspective on national security. And when he mentions Trump reinstituting existing laws, he He's probably talking about specific border security measures from that time.
Gotcha. Okay, we also saw some more local shout-outs in the record. Representative Moore in North Carolina thanked Lynn Minges for her work as she steps down from the state's Restaurant and Lodging Association.
And Representative Bill Rockus honored Kimberly Godding Brooks and Lori Swink for their community work down in Florida.
Yeah, these moments really show how members connect back to their districts, recognizing local contributions. Okay, now, this next section is quite something. There are some really serious allegations laid out by unnamed representatives about Donald John Trump and something called the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE.
Yes, the record goes into some very significant accusations here. The main claim is that President Trump allegedly used this DOGE entity to unlawfully block or impound funds that Congress had already appropriated for agencies like NIH, the FAA, the VA.
So health research, air travel safety, veteran services.
Exactly. Vital areas. And the alleged impact, according to these representatives, was negative for everyday Americans' jobs cut, services stopped, grants pulled back, all supposedly against what Congress intended.
And the really extraordinary part, or one of them, is the claim that Mr. Musk exercised, de facto control over DOGE.
That's the assertion. The record even points to President Trump's address to Congress on March 4th, 2025, which these representatives claim seemed to confirm Musk's influence. It's a really striking claim about potential private influence over public funds and government functions.
And it doesn't stop there. There are accusations of constitutional legal violations by Musk and his subordinates, like that impoundment of funds, privacy and security breaches with sensitive data, even unlawful firing of government employees.
These allegations strike right at the core of checks and balances, the rule of law. The record suggests, potentially, a major overreach of executive power and a disregard for established procedures. They claim that President Trump aimed to be a tyrant, dictator, and autocrat by usurping powers. Well, that's about as serious as it gets in our system.
The record also mentions alleged violations of the separation of powers, like controlling taxes and spending, which is Congress's job, and even claims of intimidating state officials. It paints a picture of a potential fundamental challenge to American governance.
And it's crucial to remember these are allegations formally entered into the Congressional Record. Their presence there means they're officially part of the legislative discussion.
Right, noted. Okay, moving to something less charged. Appointments. Representative Amo is now on the Board of Trustees for the Harry S. Truman Scholarship Foundation.
Which supports future public servants. A great cause.
And Representative Schneider and Frankel from Florida were appointed to the United States Holocaust Memorial Council.
Yeah, these show how members contribute beyond just making laws. They get involved in these important national institutions.
Okay, there was also a key discussion on House Resolution 364, the Gold Shield Families Resolution. This is about supporting families of first responders killed in the line of duty.
Right, and it deliberately makes a parallel with Gold Star families from the military. It recognizes that deep loss for families of police, firefighters, EMTs, correctional officers, dispatchers. The goal is to make sure these families get the support and recognition they need. It really emphasizes the dangers these jobs involve.
Following that, a motion came up on House Concurrent Resolution 30 expressing support for local law enforcement. But this one seemed to spark some disagreement.
Yeah, you saw a clear partisan split emerge here. Republicans brought up the defund the police phrase, pointing back to the summer of 2020.
And Democrats fired back, arguing it was actually the Trump administration and this alleged DOGE that defunded local police by cutting grant programs. They even named cities where they said funding was cut.
It really shows how the same issue can be framed so differently depending on your political lens. The debate also touched on proposed cuts in the current president's budget to DOJ grants, FEMA, FBI, CISA, raising concerns about impacts on local police and national security.
And there were even these serious claims about the DOJ and State Department being weaponized, citing the removal of the U.S. pardon attorney Liz Oyer as an example.
Those are significant claims suggesting potential politicization of justice and law enforcement, which always raises concerns about impartiality, a cornerstone of the system.
Okay, let's shift to some specific bills now. First, the Benefits That Endure for Lifetimes of Service Act, Belos Act.
H.R. 1682. This one expands free national park access for Gold Star families and also families of veterans who die from service-related causes later on. It builds on the existing America the Beautiful Pass. It's named for Mark Bello, a veteran and aviation figure. This kind of bill usually gets strong bipartisan support, recognizing military family sacrifices.
Makes sense. Then H.R. 331, expanding the flatside wilderness in Arkansas.
Right, adding more land to it. It builds on the original 1984 Wilderness Act. Apparently, the original plan was even bigger. This new proposal comes from a 2019 study and seems to have local backing, including from Governor Sanders. The backstory of the 84 Act sounds like a neat example of bipartisanship, too.
Also, in H.R. 331, amendments to the Aquifer Recharge Flexibility Act.
Yeah, the original 2020 Act made it easier to use irrigation canals to recharge aquifers. This amendment would let third parties use existing rights-of-way for the same thing without needing more federal permission. Though there were some concerns raised about, federal overreach and just how complex managing water resources already is.
And still, in H.R. 331, changes to the Abandoned Mine Land Reclamation Program.
This is about cleaning up old coal mines from before modern regulations. It would let third-party groups do the cleanup and give them some liability protection to encourage them, especially for tackling acid mine drainage. It's kind of like those Good Samaritan laws some states have, like Pennsylvania.
Okay, another bill, H.R. 1001, about Glen Canyon Dam bypass flows.
This one requires the Bureau of Reclamation and the Western Area Power Administration, DABABA, to work together and study the impacts of bypass flows. They need to look at how it affects the Upper Colorado River Basin Fund, hydropower, endangered species. It really highlights that constant balancing act with water in the West, especially with the drought, juggling farm, city, industry, and environmental needs.
Then H.R. 677, the Expedited Appeals Review Act.
This is aimed at speeding up appeals for certain Department of the Interior decisions that go to the Interior Board of Land Appeals, or IBLA. It sets new deadlines for IBLA, and if they miss them, the case can go straight to court. The idea is just to cut down the backlog.
H.R. 677 also had that provision to rename Saratoga National Historical Park.
That's right, renaming it Saratoga National Battlefield Park. The idea is that Battlefield better reflects its huge importance as the turning point in the Revolution, where the wind brought in the French. Good timing, too, with the 250th anniversary of the Declaration coming up.
And more locally focused, H.R. 677 also dealt with land conveyances for cemeteries in Arizona.
Yeah, directing the Secretary of Agriculture to transfer small bits of land from the Apache-Sitgreaves National Forest to Apache and Navajo counties. Basically, their cemeteries are running out of space. The bill makes sure the land stays cemeteries.
Okay. Also in that bill, updates to the South Pacific Tuna Treaty.
Yes, updating U.S. law related to that treaty. It's a really critical agreement for American fishing boats to access those tuna-rich waters. Super important for the U.S. fleet's competitiveness, especially for places like Hawaii and American Samoa, where the tuna industry is huge. The goal seems to be clarifying rules and strengthening the U.S. presence there.
It's still, in H.R. 677, renaming landmarks in Patterson Great Falls National Historical Park.
Right. The scenic Overlook Trail Bridge and Overlook Park would be named after Bill Pascrill, Jr., honoring his long service to Patterson in New Jersey. The Great Falls themselves are such a symbol of American industry.
And a land conveyance in Sacramento, California.
Yeah, this addresses a tricky land ownership situation where the federal government holds a reversionary interest, meaning the land could potentially revert back to them under certain conditions. This lets current owners like Sacramento State University buy out that federal interest, clearing the way for a planned research park.
And another piece of H.R. 677 focused on removing hazard trees near power lines.
Trying to streamline that process to cut down wildfire risk. Apparently, right now, even after a utility cuts down a dangerous tree near a line, they still have to go through a whole timber sale process, which causes delays. They mentioned the Dixie Fire as an example of how serious this can be.
And finally, H.R. 677 also included renaming the Salem Maritime National Historic Site
to Salem Maritime National Historical Park. Again, trying to better reflect its long history, going way back to colonial times, and the fact that it was actually the first historic site in the whole national park system back in 1938.
Okay, wow, that was a lot in the House bills. The Record also gave us a peek at the Senate. Sounds like they were in recess but came back, though some votes got postponed.
Yeah, and we saw several brief remarks to Mr. Carter from Georgia honoring Ann Popple, Mr. Latimer referencing that New York Post piece about the $400 million jet President Trump supposedly got from Qatar, and kind of the timing of that alongside Medicaid cut debates.
Right, optics. There was also talk about collective bargaining and worries about proposals limiting the Department of Labor's power on workplace safety. Mr. Vindman spoke on Ukraine, calling for a ceasefire, more pressure on Putin, and raising concerns about cuts to a program tracking abducted Ukrainian kids.
And Mr. Cohen had that sharp comment about the plane, calling it nice graft. The Congressional Black Caucus spoke out really strongly against the Republican reconciliation package, listing potential harms to healthcare, SNAP, EIH, veterans, education. Then Ms. Capture moved to adjourn.
We also saw lots of House resolutions introduced on energy efficiency, renaming the Persian Gulf, military depots, post office names, Salvation Army Week. And the Senate took up Troy Mink's nomination for Air Force Secretary.
And in the Senate, child care affordability was a big topic, with Senator Britt pushing the Child Care Availability and Affordability Act. Senator Ernst honored Kelsey Daniel. Senator Murray strongly opposed the House Medicaid plan, citing Arkansas's experience with work requirements and also mentioning concerns about DOGE again.
Senator Schmidt remembered former Senator Kit Bond and tried to get unanimous consent on the ambassador to the Vatican nomination, but there was an objection.
Right, and that $400 million plane gift kept coming up. Senator Murphy raised potential emoluments clause issues and a constitutional clause about officials taking gifts from foreign governments.
Which led to resolutions to condemn accepting the plane and even direct the Senate lawyer to maybe file a lawsuit.
Yeah, but those resolutions also got objections, so they didn't pass immediately. However, the Senate did unanimously pass a bill renaming the Anahuac National Wildlife Refuge for Jocelyn Nungare.
There was a roll call vote on judicial nominees. Senator Kennedy talked about education challenges and progress in Louisiana. Senator Sanders argued against the reconciliation bill, healthcare, taxes, debt. Senator Welch voiced concerns about Trump administration immigration policies, specifically deportations to El Salvador.
The Foreign Relations Committee got notices about potential arms sales. New Senate bills were introduced on crime victims, permit rules, the emoluments clause again. They agreed to a resolution congratulating the Trinity College men's basketball team and referred another resolution about humanitarian aid to Gaza to committee.
And the record wrapped up with more House tributes to various people and groups, committee reports on defense issues, announcements of those appointments to the Holocaust Council and Truman Foundation Board.
Plus committee schedules and a final Senate unanimous consent request just to print the text of a Truth in Terrorists Act in the record, just getting it formally documented.
Okay. Phew. That was a lot. Let's try to unpack what this all means for you listening. We've walked through a pretty dense slice of congressional life, big debates on the budget, healthcare, security, plus all sorts of specific laws being made or changed.
And here's where it gets really interesting for you. You can see direct lines from these discussions to things that might affect your life.
Yeah.
Access to healthcare, how we support veterans and first responders, even things like expanding wilderness areas or making sure local cemeteries have enough space. It's all being hashed out in Congress.
Yeah, this deep dive really shows that constant back and forth, doesn't it, between policy ideas, political priorities, and just the nuts and bolts of governing.
So, what's a takeaway for staying informed? Well, the Congressional Record itself, while maybe intimidating, is the primary source. It shows you what's really being discussed and decided. Even getting summaries like this helps you track where laws might be heading and think about their potential impact.
We definitely encourage you to see this as just a starting point. Did any specific debate, maybe the budget reconciliation bill, or those questions about government efficiency, did anything grab your interest?
Because the full record and lots of other resources, they're out there if you want to dig deeper into any of these topics yourself.
Final thought then. This glimpse inside Congress really reminds us that governing isn't static, right? It's this ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
Your understanding, your engagement, it's all part of that. So how will you keep following along and maybe even add your voice to the mix?